to talk about fires and their impact on air quality and health. And we've got some experts from different agencies and universities to help us out. IARCPIC exists in the Executive Office of the President to coordinate U.S. federal efforts under the Arctic Research and Policy Act. Many of you may be familiar with the current Arctic Research Plan that expires this year. And so we're currently developing the next 5-year research plan. We've solicited input from this community in the past on that, and we'll keep you informed as that develops. Through IARCPIC collaborations, we bring together U.S. federal agencies with universities, industry, international partners to accelerate progress towards our research objectives. So we hold regular meetings focused on the themes relating to research objectives and the associated performance elements. If you are new to IARCPIC, we recommend that you establish an account on our collaborations website. And by doing so, you'll join nearly 1,000 members and gain access to our network that distributes meeting announcements, funding opportunities, recent research findings, and much more. The collaboration teams benefit from the collective input of all our team members. We encourage you to highlight your research, and we like to make all our work visible to Congress and federal agencies and communicate regularly with federal program managers. To enhance this participation and ensure a positive environment for all participants, we're committed to establishing and enforcing a code of conduct. We want to support a safe and productive, inclusive, and welcoming meeting. So if at any time there's something that will make you more comfortable, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and specifically reach out to Jen and myself. I'm not sure Heis is going to be able to join us right away. He's got a conflict with this time. But anyway, again, please feel free to chat at any time, introduce yourself. Oh, Heis is here. Welcome, Heis. I'm just looking at the chat. So our first speaker is Bill Williams Simpson from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Bill is going to talk about the alpaca field campaign that was supposed to be happening right now and it's been postponed till a year from now. Go ahead, Bill.
Great, can you hear me? Good. So I am going to go to full screen on PowerPoint. Are people seeing slides full screen now? Great. So thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to tell you about this study. This study that we are working on is called ALPACA, or the Alaskan Layered Pollution and Chemical Analysis Project. And I'm one of the co-organizers of this field project. And really our goal is to better understand how pollution behaves under cold and dark conditions. So the Alpaca project really has its beginnings in the community in Fairbanks, which has had concerns about air quality for a long time. And we've heard those concerns from many different places. One of the places I heard it a lot was from working on the Fairbanks Air Quality Stakeholders Group. And there, I heard a lot of things that we didn't have answers to. And so we got together a group of scientists on this field and had a workshop. This was the workshop back in May 2018. And then that led to a white paper, which you can get from the site that's listed right here. After that, we decided we were going to put in a grant to do about half of the science that was in the Alpaca white paper. And that was funded by the National Science Foundation under a Navigating the New Arctic grant. And I'll just review what that is for folks who aren't familiar with it. So that grant, which was funded by NSF, is called Sustainably Navigating Arctic Pollution Through Engaging Communities, or SNAPTech. And it, like Barry said, was going to have a field study right now, but it's now delayed to 2022 because of COVID. Key questions in the project are, how does air pollution behave under cold and dark conditions? What about indoor air? That was a big community concern. So infiltration of outdoor air, changes to particles when they come indoors and warm up. And then indoor sources like heating related sources are things we wanted to study. And then we realized that this is occurring in a societal context. And so we want to ask how societal factors affect the community response to this problem. So that's kind of what SnapTech is trying to do. A key component of that project is to have a connection with the community. And our public face, we decided to call the Fair Air. So our website is there, fairair.community.uaf.edu. And this is the web page. As a part of setting up that web page and starting the project, we held some kickoff meetings, and you can see a picture on the right here of a meeting that was in North Pole in February 2020. North Pole is a nearby community near Fairbanks that has a lot of air quality problems around here. So we were off to a good start, and then of course COVID happened, and because of concern for impacts on the community, if we brought a bunch of researchers here, we delayed for a year to 2022. That kind of left us without as good connection to the community, and also left us without being able to meet face to face. So we decided we wanted to have a public set of Zoom-based meetings. So what we're doing right now is a thing called the Fair Air Indoors events. And this is a set of Zoom-based lectures followed by a bunch of questions with experts on these fields, specifically focusing on things that we haven't studied as much, like indoor air quality, 2 talks on that. And then there's a lot of community interest about wildfire smoke, because we often have really bad wildfire smoke in Alaska. So this series is going on right now. You can see the links there, and you can also go to the Fair Air site and get more information about it if you're interested in it. So one of the other things that the delay has let happen is that many other folks have joined on to our field project. As I said, about half of the original goals of Alpaca were able to be funded through the NSF grant. And a lot of other components have been added in. I won't go through this full list here, but you can see there's a large list of collaborators funded by NOAA, further funding from NSF. We have a lot of international involvement too. So that's been excellent to build out the field study. And there are actually a few proposals still pending. So we're hoping to go even further into more of the Alpaca study plan. I wanted to highlight Kathy Law, who's been one of the organizers of Alpaca for a long time, and she's done a great job with the French researchers who were here before and will be here in the main field campaign. Of course, this work is relevant to policy and to air quality regulation. So the EPA and DEC, the State of Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, are great partners on this project. 2 internal grants were funded within EPA that are bringing a lot of good modeling to this, which is excellent and going to really help us. And then we always rely on the measurements of the state to have long-term time series and then some expanded chemical speciation results. So thinking of that, we wanted to look a little bit at preliminary data from this current winter to see how different things are this winter. Because one of our other concerns about running the field study on its normal timescale was that we might have an anomalous set of emissions. You know, COVID has led to economic problems. Economic distress often leads people to burning wood in Fairbanks. So that may change sources. So we started looking at this, and we found that that the weather's been very different this year. So if you look on the left side here, you see temperature versus PM 2.5 pollution. And the red dots are last winter, and then the blue dots are this winter. And the first thing you obviously see is that the blue dots never get as cold as they were in the previous winter. Looks like that cold may be coming this week. So at some point it'll come, and that'll be important for the final analysis. But this warmer condition is usually associated with less pollution, but the pollution is actually quite similar this year to previous ones, which may indicate more emissions in this anomalous year. We're really going to have to wait for the year to go through and for these data to be finalized. Again, this is DEC preliminary data, so it's not finalized yet. to tell the full story, but it's something that we thought might happen and is going to be important for the study overall. So that's what I have for you now. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or maybe we're going to take questions at the end. So however you want to do it.
Thanks, Bill. I think we have time for one question. And while you're thinking of your question, we can switch to the next presentation. The title is Environment and Climate Change Canada's Progress in Incorporating Wildland Fire Emissions into Operational Air Quality Forecast Services and Modeling. We have 3 representatives from ECCC, Didier Davignon, Wang Min Gong, and Jack Chen. I think, Jack, you're going to be our first. Oh, hi, Didier. I think, Jack, you're going to start us off, right?
Yes, I think I'll do the presentation, and then the first part of it, and hand it over to Wang Min for the second part, and I'll do the slides for Wang Min.
Okay, so I would write your questions in the chat as we go along, and then if we have time, we'll go ahead and ask the presenters to answer them. And if we run out of time, we'll have them write the answers in the chat box. Go ahead, Jack. We can see your presentation just fine.
Okay. All right. So I guess originally Didier was going to do the intro, but then I'm stepping in to do the first couple slides. So I'll talk about the operational air quality forecasting that's taking place right now at the Environment and Climate Change Canada, and then pass the second half of the presentation to Wang Min Gong, our research scientist, on her work on the air quality modeling project, specifically on the Arctic region. So one of the main data of the department is the delivery of various weather-related services, including weather forecasting and various hazardous environmental predictions. This is done through the operating arms of the department called the Meteorological Services of Canada. And here are just the few operational services specific to air quality. First is the weather forecasting from the global down to regional and urban scales. And this is the critical information in supporting provinces, federal responses, operations from short-term weather to seasonal outlook and including areas covering the Canadian Arctic. Specific to air quality, the department operates smoke prediction systems through numerical modeling and air quality forecasting systems. This is aimed at supporting various emergency responses, as well as delivery of daily air quality health index in issuing warnings and alerts to our meteorologists across the region. And then there's the longer term seasonal forecast on data providing to, say, the Canadian Forest Service in, say, seasonal wildland fire risks forecast and landscaping modeling, including lightning data, which are important ingredients in having the estimates of fire risks for the season. So here, specific to wildland smoke forecasting, we have 2 national systems in place. And and these are aimed targeting different user groups and different response timeframes. The first is the smoke dispersion Mldp forecasting, and this is mostly very similar to the US Forest Service Blue Sky system with Lagrangian-based trajectory modeling driven by meteorology from our numerical weather predictions system. It has no chemistry, and so it simulates dispersion of smoke very quickly with fast response time at very high resolution at about 2.5 kilometer grid resolution. The simulation is done several times a day with near real-time fire hotspot from the natural resources of Canada, Canadian Forest Service. And the goal is really dispersion of smoke wildfire smoke for our emergency response groups. The second is, and this is more of my area of research, is the air quality forecasting system called Firework. And this is explicit simulation of atmospheric chemistry physics using chemical transport models coupled with the NWP. And this certainly requires a lot more computational resources, and I'll talk a bit more about this in the next couple of slides. So before I go into Firework, Dee also wanted me to mention that recently the department responded to a request from the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, in building this North American vegetation, fire, and smoke pollution warning system. So the goal really is to be the data center specific to vegetation, fire, and smoke pollution across North America by including various global and regional forecasting models that has the biomass burning emissions capability. So at this time, our data center includes near real-time outputs of several global and regional smoke forecasting systems, including the ones from Canada, Firework, the ones from NOAA for the US, ECNWF for US and Japan. He also has the ensemble predictions from the International Cooperative Aerosol Prediction System, ICAP, and also include the North America fire danger map. This is in collaborations with Canadian Forest Service. So here is I'll say the demo URL for this data portal. This is the second center by WMO of this data services, and with the first center in Singapore covering the Southeast Asia region. So moving on, so this is I prepared this one and the next slide describing the Firework system, with the rest of the time really dedicated for Wan Min on her talk in the Arctic modeling. If there's any questions specific to this, feel free to send me an email or in the chat. So in Canada, we've started our operational wildfire air quality forecasting system since 2016. And this happened to be a year with the terrible Fort McMurray fire in Alberta, which is one of the most expensive natural disaster here in Canada. And it has the operational product in our weather office website. And the system actually started with a 48-hour forecast, twice daily during the Canadian fire season from April to October. But since just last year in April 2020, we've extended the forecast to 72 hours and operating year round. So Firework basically is our department's numerical regional air quality deterministic prediction system with added near real-time fire emissions. So with that, this is really quite an expensive operational system, because by taking the difference with our anthropogenic prediction system with Firework, we get PM, say air quality forecast from fire emissions directly. For example, such as this one for our modeling domain covering US and Canada. And I don't know, and this was supposed to be an animation of PM surface level PM 2.5 from Firework for the September 12, 2020 period, where there was, as most of you know, pretty significant fire activity all along the west coast of the United States, with very high PM 2.5 impacting Western Canada. And on the left here is basically a quick time series of surface level PM 2.5 from Firework in blue, and that of observations for a station in Vancouver, BC. for the month of September 2020. And what we can see here very quickly is that the forecast of firework PM 2.5 captured the overall trend. So again, very quickly, firework really, the key two modeling systems is our CFAPS, Canadian Forest Fire Emissions Prediction System, and our GEMMEC chemical transport model. So CFAPS provides fire emissions with near real-time hotspots from various satellite sensors. And fire emissions is modeled using a sort of more of a bottom-up approach with a fire size based on past observed fire, and it's categorized by region and fire type, fuel type across Canada. And fire emissions is dependent on estimated hourly fuel consumption, driven by forecast meteorology based on fire and fuel type. And one sort of key advance of using this approach is that we are able to parameterize hourly plume injection height using forecast meteorology based on modeled fire energy thermodynamics and basically the numerical forecast atmospheric profiles. So, and being a bottom-up approach, we control emissions with input emission factors and chemical speciation depending on the dominant combustion processes that's modeled within the CFAP system. And very quickly, the key sort of chemical transport model that's in firework is GEMMEC. So here we're using the 10 kilometer.
Hey, Jack, we
Yes.
have to wrap up here in just a couple minutes.
Okay, so I should pass this right on to.
Yeah, because everyone will have your slides. We've got a copy of your slides posted. So Wan Ming, I'm sorry to give you just a few minutes. If you could.
All right, so maybe I'll just, mention the highlight of this thing, and then
Okay.
you have this thing posted, and
yes,
then people can look at that. I guess this is mostly looking at northern wildland fire emission impact on the Arctic. I guess we, in the past few years, we had developed this Arctic air quality modeling capability and tried to look at a few things in focusing on the Arctic. This particular study happens to look at a simulation of 2014 NetCare field campaign, and where we did the model simulation for 3 months. And we did look at the fire impact. So basically we included North American fire, which is based on CFAPS that Jack just described. And for the fire that's outside America, North America, we used fin emission that mostly, you can see our model domain that's focused on Arctic, that covers all Canada and then some Russian and some European area. So basically for the non-North American fire that's coming out from a fin, that's mostly for that time period, it's in Siberia. So we've run 3 kind of model runs, one with all the fires on, and then another run with North American fire only, and another run with no fire. So comparing between these things, we can see what impact of fire and specifically what impact of North American fire and what impact of Russian fire or Siberian fire. So next slide. Yeah. Okay, so I guess I hope the thing that's not cut off on my.
Oh, we can see everything.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so basically the next few slides just to show the impact on a few pollutants of interest. The first one is ozone and PM 2.5. These are health related. So what you see is the what's the July average like ground level ozone and PM 2.5. And then the next three panels showing the impact of all fires and North American fires only, or the Russian fire only. So I'm just going to go flip through the slides and then come to what the main point is. So next slides, we're looking at black carbon concentration as well as black carbon deposition. I guess why is it important? Most people know that black carbon is a short-lived climate forcer. So itself, it absorbs sunlight. So it's warming the atmospheric column up and has a warming effect mostly. And then the deposition onto, especially black carbon deposition on snow, that will enhance snow melt and change albedo, and that has impact as well. You can see the impact on the Arctic region, especially on the eastern Arctic, which is the Canadian archipelago. It is mostly impacted by North American fire. There's quite a bit of impact over the Northwest Passage region area, so that will have impact on snow melt ice. So next slide, I'm showing. So these are the two. One is the aerosol octave depth. That is a measure of how much aerosol is absorbing and scattering light. So that has impact the radiative forcing, and the lower panel shows the impact on CCN, which has impact on cloud microphysics and indirectly affect radiation. So this is just to show how much the wildfire that's being impacting the Arctic region. So we're coming to the kind of a few concluding remarks. So next slide. So just to show that for July 2014, it looks like the North American wildland fires seem to have the greatest impact to the Arctic overall, particularly to the Eastern Arctic. The impact from the Siberia fire is somewhat limited and more restricted to longer-lived secondary pollutants. I didn't have the time to go through these things, but you can see it from the slides. In terms of black carbon concentration and deposition, we see there's a significant, the North American wildfire has a major contribution to the transport and deposition of black carbon to the Canadian Eastern Arctic. And also the wildfire has a significant contribution to increase in AOD and CCN over the Arctic in the summertime. And we do have some, there are a lot of uncertainties in terms of how we model these things, in terms of some of the technical details, how we treat plume rise, and some of the differences between different data set and different way of processing these fires. So that will have impact on the model result as well. So that's just a little brief introduction.
Thank you, Guanming. That's very impressive, high resolution modeling for all of the Arctic. Okay. And it's good to see both the impacts on air quality and on climate. So talking about how wildfire smoke impacts human health is Serena Chung from the US EPA headquarters. Go ahead, Serena.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I am trying to find my slide. I seem to have lost it.
It's okay. I do see Jack and DDA's been helping answer questions, but there have been some questions posted in the chat about the modeling work that you and Guanming are doing.
All right, I'll try to answer on the chat box.
Great. And Serena, if you have problems, Hazel might be able to show your slides.
Yep, I'm just pulling them up.
Okay.
Would that be helpful?
Sure, yes. I'm not sure what happened. We tested it off.
Here it is. Is this the right set
Yes.
of slides?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And can you
And let me see
slide more?
if that will work. Yeah, you can go ahead and start.
Yeah. So thanks, Barry, for the intro. My name is Serena Chong. I'm the US EPA Office of Research Development. I'm going to try to give you a general overview of the health effect of wildfire smoke. I'm not a health expert by any means, but nonetheless, this is a pretty top-level overview, and hopefully that'll give you enough interesting information. And then my next slide is just a disclaimer. I'm from the EPA. I always have to say this. You know, this represents my view and another view of the agency. Next slide, please. I think everyone here pretty much know that wildfires is an important issue in many regions around the world. Here, I'm just mentioning a few statistics just to highlight why wildfire is a growing concern in the US. For example, just last year in 2020, over 10 million acres were burned. And this is just for comparison, this is bigger than the state of Maryland. Also last year in Northern California, the August complex fire burned more than 1 million acres. That was the largest fire complex recorded in California history. And that was bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It's very great to be able to have climate change on my slides now. So, you know, there's many of studies that indicate with the conclusion that, you know, the increase in wildfire activity in the Western US is in part due to climate change, and further climate change is predicted to continue to increase wildfire risk over the next several decades, and therefore the problem just is not going to go away. Next slide, please. Wildfire smoke is, you know, it's a compact mixture of particles and gases, but in terms of health effect, the particulate matter, or PM, is a component that's the greatest concern to public health. And so here, before getting to the wildfire specific health studies, I thought it was good to look at the, you know, the summary of health effect for just PM in general. I'm showing here a table from EPA's Integrated Science Assessment for PM that was published in 2019, or ISA for PM. So the ISA it's a really comprehensive synthesis of the literature, peer-reviewed literature related to the health and welfare effects of PM. It's over 2,000 pages, but it also has very many nice summary tables to help synthesize the information. And so to arrive at this table, this summary table, the ISA use broad research categories that show on the left column. And in doing the evaluation, it used a weight of evidence approach and integrates evidence from across scientific disciplines, including exposure science, epidemiological studies, animal toxicology, control human exposure, et cetera, et cetera. And so most of you probably know a lot about some of this, but just to highlight a few things, you know, evidence is very clear that PM is associated with a range of health effects. And let's focus on PM 2.5 here. There's very strong evidence that both short-term and long-term exposure to PM leads to increased mortality, as well as cardiovascular morbidity. And there's also strong evidence for respiratory effects. For just long-term exposure, there's strong evidence of nervous system effects, as well as cancer. Okay, so what about wildfire smoke? Next slide, please. Yeah, so unfortunately, there's a couple of systematic review papers published not so long ago. And here's a paper, this is a table from a paper by Wayne Casio, who's an EPA. He's one of our center director in EPA's Office of Research Development. So he summarized this information about wildfire smoke health effects based on a systematic review paper from led by Colin Reed that was published in 2016. Colleen Rhee is now an assistant professor at University of Colorado Boulder. So this systematic review is based on results reported from 43 epidemiological studies after filtering out studies that the authors consider to have a high potential bias. Now, based on what we know about health effects of PM2.5, not surprisingly, the evidence show a strong association of wildfire smoke or wildfire-related PM2.5 exposure and all-cause mortality, as well as respiratory morbidity. In terms of mortality, this is for all-cause mortality, because currently there's not enough evidence to identify specific causes of mortality that's most affected by wildfire smoke exposure. And for respiratory mobility, there are strong association between exposure and exacerbation of asthma, COPD, bronchitis, and pneumonia. In contrast to what we know about the health of PM2.5, in general, the epidemiological study linking wildfire smoke exposure to cardiovascular mortality and mobility is actually has been mixed. And there's some studies indicate inconclusive or negative effects, but some more recent studies suggest that there's a significant effect. So that's a question that still need to be studied. Next slide. So returning to the table from, sorry, previous slide. Yeah, returning to the table from the PMISA, based on the fact that wildfire smoke is mostly PM or has a lot of PM, we sort of know what the likely adverse health effects may be. But on the other hand, there hasn't been enough study to know for certain. So areas where we don't know yet in terms of wildfire smoke includes different health outcomes, different health endpoints, including birth outcomes, metabolic outcomes, cognitive decline, neurological development, as well as mental health. Very importantly, we need more study on the long-term health effects of exposures, or how long will the health last after a single or few exposures at very, very high level of concentrations. Another important area of research that we don't know about is health effects of repeated exposure. As the frequency of large wildfires increases, there are communities that are starting to experience wildfire smoke episode over multiple fire seasons. So they're getting repeated exposure. Next slide, please. Yeah, so when we think about health effects of air pollution, it's important to think about who might be affected the most. Because not everyone will experience adverse effects that's large enough to have clinical symptoms. But for others, it can be very severe, including leading to death. Based on abundance of epidemiological studies, we're able to identify people who are at risk from PM2.5 and therefore very likely to be at higher risk from wildfire exposure. And these populations include people with pre-existing respiratory or cardiovascular disease, adults 20 and 65 years and older, populations lower socioeconomic status, and children as well developing fetus. And so Irene Paul led a paper. She's a statistician at EPA, and she led a study that created this national map of community health vulnerability index. This index considers prevalence of factors that at the county level of factors that are known to increase susceptibility to air pollutant-related health effects. And so the region, for example, in the Southeast, that shows the highest vulnerability. Those are regions that tend to have high vulnerability due to multiple factors, such as prevalence of people with pre-existing cardiovascular or metabolic diseases, people with childhood asthma, as well as economic status, low economic status. Next slide. And so far, all the study I've referred back to in the previous slides, and as well as the systematic review, are based on epidemiological studies. Right now, we don't have enough consistent evidence from those epidemiological studies that wildfire PM2.5 affects health differently than the effect of PM2.5 from other sources. But epidemiological studies, it's hard to get enough statistical power, especially when we talk about wildfire small because, you know, they're episodic in nature, sometimes very short durations. The exposed population might be small because fire happens in rural areas. And there's also just, you know, measurements are very sparse for providing very good exposure data. So before I wrap up and get into the summary page, I just want to highlight one of many toxicological studies being done at EPA that are being used to try to understand the mechanism for health effects and to understand the differential toxicity due to different factors. So in this particular study highlighted here, they use a tube furnace to generate lab-generated wildfire biomass burning smoke, and they can do it with, you know, they can do it for flaming and smoldering conditions. And, you know, for the plots shown on the right, on the top one is showing the mutagenicity, and on the bottom, it's showing the lung toxicity data. And then they shown it by, you know, different burning conditions and as well different kind of fuel that was burned. And so you can see, you know, clearly in both these cases on a per PM 2.5 mass basis, the flaming, the smoke coming from flaming conditions have higher mutagenicity as well as lung toxicity. And then they also depends on the type of fuel burned. So clearly, you know, not all smoke is not almost are the same, and they will have different health effects. So this is just an example of the kind of studies that need to be done for us to better understand health effects of wildfire smoke. Final slide. So just kind of to summarize, based on epidemiological studies, there's very strong association with all-cause mortality and respiratory mobility. Not so much we're not so sure about cardiovascular mobility yet. The size of the at-risk population increasing, you know, as people get older, fire increasing more frequently, people moving into wildfire urban interfaces more. And of course, climate change is increasing the risk of wildfire. And there's also some knowledge gap already mentioned on different health outcomes, including cardiovascular outcomes, on long-term effects to acute exposure, effects of repeat exposure. Those are two big major questions. And also sort of, you know, the differential impact for various factors, and then understanding the mechanistic pathway that actually lead to the health outcomes.
Okay, thank you, Serena. I would encourage you to post questions in the chat. So we had a talk about the Alpaca project, which is dealing primarily with wood smoke emissions in Fairbanks and North Pole. And then we had ECCC and their modeling of Arctic wildfires. Serena talking about the general health effects of wildfire smoke, and you saw that hazard map was just the lower 48. And so I'm really excited that we have Aaron McTeague and Kayla Kraus talking about supporting Alaska tribes and local air quality issues. They are tribal air specialists from EPA Region 10. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Hi, everyone. Erin McTighe. We're based in the Seattle office, Kayla and I, but from different corners of our homes, as many of you are as well, presenting today. Kayla's going to bring up the presentation here in just a second. I am going to just start talking. Really honored to be here today with this group of folks and share some of the ways that we work in the region with Indigenous populations in the Northwest and Alaska. And of course, in particular, we're going to be focusing on collaborations with partners and Alaska tribes on protecting local air quality. And so this will be a broad brush in a quick presentation, but happy to dig in another time if there are pieces of this that you all are interested in. Next slide, please. So some of this may be familiar to other federal agency folks on the line from the US. So our role in working with tribes is really a government to government relationship. We really focus on our trust responsibilities to tribes. And so we have this unique relationship in working more closely with tribes in some of the air quality projects and programs that they're putting into place. And so I think that's one of the best parts of our work is just building those relationships and being able to have a more more of a connection with individual tribes and the work that they do. We really try to understand tribal priorities and respect traditional knowledge. Kayla's going to mention in particular some of the priorities we're hearing from Alaska tribes on air quality issues. And I'd say one of our main roles and approaches is really convening. I know that was one of the things you all were interested in, is just how do we approach supporting air quality work in Indigenous communities. And a lot of it is just supporting tribes by convening the people with the resources and the knowledge to support them in building capacity at the local level. So you'll see here a few ways that we do that is one, through administering funds, for example, the Clean Air Act or the Indian General Assistance Program, or IGAP. So tribes can do their own air quality and other environmental work in their communities. Also lots of training, technical assistance, tool development, or tailoring things that are already out there to better fit tribal needs and issues and approaches. Lots of collaboration around those topics. And then working with state agencies. I know I saw a couple of our partners at the state of Alaska on the line here to help ensure the regulatory obligations are being fulfilled. And of course, in Alaska, things are just a little bit different, or actually quite a bit different in terms of the regulatory structure for the Clean Air Act implementation, since the vast majority of tribes don't have jurisdiction over a land base like reservations, as do tribes in the lower 48 states. And so we work a lot together to just, where there are gaps in resources, gaps in science, to elevate those needs to people like Serena at ORD or other partners and other agencies. Next slide, Kayla. Maybe it's been a little slow. Are you able to advance, Kayla? I think the next slide is about partnerships. And again, looking at the list, I think a number of the partners that we work with are on this call and are really critical for understanding, you know, how this work plays out on the ground, how to tailor what we're doing to fit different tribal needs, or how to tailor things so that tribes can make them what they need, different approaches and tools to implement them on the ground. Next slide, please. And one group I'll just briefly mention is the National Tribal Air Association. A way that we're able to help connect with tribes and understand what their priorities are is to have this elected leadership group, a membership group, partially funded by EPA, to be liaisons between tribes and our agency. You'll see a picture of Ann Wyatt, one of our elected folks in Alaska, who we work with a lot to help support Alaska tribes on air needs. Next slide. Kayla,
all right. Yeah, and then one of the other ways that we support Alaska tribes is through a grant cooperative agreement from EPA. This is through our Clean Air Act funding. And so we provide this grant to the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. And as part of their work plan, they provide a lot of technical assistance on different air quality work. They assist with air monitoring, developing quality assurance in project plans. And they also have an equipment loan program, which is great because being up there located in Anchorage, they're able to easily send different types of monitors out to communities. In the picture here, you're seeing these guys holding dust tracks, which is one of the mid-range type of air samplers that we see out in the field. But they also support just a ton of training and research efforts. So it's really great to have them as a really collaborative and tribal partner in Alaska to help us implement all of this work. One of the things that ANTHC does is they actually have developed what they call phase 1 air quality assessment, which is kind of just a questionnaire that they'll work with tribes and their environmental staff on completing. And this assessment is designed for them to work through and help identify what the highest air concerns are for each tribal community. And so I forget how many they've done over the years, but they have gotten a ton of data back from these and this is just showing 2012 through 2018. And this is one way that we get to also hear what the tribal priorities are in Alaska so that we know how to adapt our work around that and be responsive to it. So it's kind of in reverse order here, but we do typically see that the highest air quality concern for tribes in Alaska is indoor air pollution, also solid waste burning and road dust. Those are kind of our top three. And then we do frequently see diesel emissions and wood stove emission use in there. We're starting to see more folks saying wildfire. And I think, there may be more emerging issues over time. I know we're running short on time, so I'll try to be pretty brief here. But of those top air concerns I mentioned, we really rely on our counterparts in the solid waste programs to address kind of that topic around solid waste burning. And then Aaron and I each focused on road dust and then indoor air respectively. And so, with road dust, there's a lot of different health concerns. It impacts the environment, safety, all sorts of things for communities. So we do try to really prioritize our work around this. And I won't go into great detail here, but as you can see from this slide, we've cranked out a whole bunch of different work. And this is EPA in collaboration with partners. And on our road dust work, we do partner most closely with Alaska DEC and also the University of Alaska Fairbanks in their transportation center there. So we've got some really great experts who have helped us do some assessments of different dust suppressants, dust palliatives, different monitoring with different sensors and things. And then, we also have just a really great host of outreach materials that have been developed. One I'll highlight here is the Rural Alaska Dust Toolkit, which is a pretty user-friendly guide, but it also kind of helps direct people where they want to jump into the weeds. And most recently this summer, we did a road dust webinar series partnering with the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals. That was recorded and you can find it online, but we were able to feature tribal presenters from 5 different communities sharing about their experiences managing road dust so that they could present to their peers about what worked and how to go about dust management.
I'll just briefly touch on indoor air quality and health. Some of these things may not be a surprise to folks on the line. Common issues that we're hearing and seeing in tribal communities in Alaska: overcrowding, housing stock that's deteriorating or was maybe never designed for an Arctic climate, mold and moisture issues connected to not having ventilation or ventilation not working or being used, old heating devices, and access to piped water still being an issue in a number of communities. And one of the ways that we support tribes in addressing these is helping them to figure out how they can access or supporting increasing access to funds for addressing indoor air issues. Of course, EPA is not a housing agency, quote unquote, but we have some funds that can be used for assessing the issues for education and outreach, exploring solutions. But at the end of the day, there's not just one pot of funds to use for addressing indoor air issues. So we support tribes in braiding them together. And on the next slide, you'll see just a quick snapshot of a resource that we worked with Tribal Healthy Homes Network, another grantee, to put together this really comprehensive database of funding resources for indoor air quality work for tribes. Next slide. And just a quick example, and we're about to round out the presentation here. I know we're running out of time, but the Hoonah Indian Association says a great example of a project they did using EPA funds and braiding together different resources to change out some old leaky wood stoves with EPA certified stoves, and did some pre and post air quality monitoring inside homes, and saw some really great improvements. I guess they both did replacement stoves and repair of stoves, and that was supported through our Indian General Assistance Program. They do some great work there. Next slide. Turn it to Kayla.
Yeah, and a lot of this has already been said, but there's other air issues as we brought up. Several presenters today talked about wildfires, so we're happy to hear that. But we're also seeing, more frequent flooding events in Alaska, one of the impacts of climate change. We're on kind of more the regulation side. we try and track things. More recently, there is the other solid waste incineration regulations. And so, we kind of liaise and help communicate those types of new regulations to, the tribes in Alaska. And finally, I mean, just a lot of, the success comes from working with these partners. We've provided lots of great trainings and just have a whole wealth of folks who are involved in this. And, the challenges do really come down to the funding, as I'm sure you guys all know and understand. But in working with a lot of tribal communities too, there's a lot of turnover in their environmental staff in rural Alaska. So we do really end up focusing on providing trainings because one community might have a brand new environmental coordinator, and so they need to get up to speed again. Aaron mentioned kind of those jurisdictional differences between Alaska and tribes in other parts of the country, and other challenges being the more limited monitoring network, and just a lot of different things that communities are struggling with up there, whether it's environmental, things with COVID right now, broadband access, etc. So lots to tackle all the time. Thank you. And that's us, Aaron and Kayla. And I provided a link for our website too, if you want to check out some of our info on there.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Aaron and Kayla. We're at the top of the hour, but I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes if there's, you did get a couple questions in the chat. Somebody asked if those priority lists was from the tribes point of view. I think, are these priority concerns of the tribes or for the tribes from outside agencies?
Yeah, priorities of the Alaska tribes who completed these community assessments. They may have had some agency support or tribal consortium support in it, but yep, priorities of the tribes.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think Bill just had to leave, but we still have Serena and Kayla, Aaron, and we still have Jack and Wang Ming and DDA. So I'm happy to hang around for another minute or two for any additional questions from folks. I thought it was interesting that I forgot that aviation gas still is leaded. So I'm sure that is a big source of lead to Alaska.
Yeah, just in the small planes. Mm-hmm.
So Hazel sent a note to everyone. For the folks that have to sign off, thank you for joining. And we have another meeting. So we have monthly meetings. Hazel and Jen, can you remember what our topic is for our next meeting?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Hazel. Do you have it in front of you?
Oh yeah, I dropped it in the chat. It's going to be Greenland ice core, historical climate, and trace gas analysis. So it should be an interesting one.
Great. Yeah. Jen, is that some NSF funded work?
We're lining up 3 speakers. They're not all confirmed yet.
Okay.
I know one of them is NSF funded, and I'm actually not sure about the other 2, but
that's okay. But we have 3 speakers.
Well, we're working on 3 speakers. Yep. And I don't want to say since we haven't confirmed them, I think.
Yeah.
But one is doing current contemporary water vapor isotopes in the sea level part of Greenland. Another one is looking at gases in fern cores, both from the Arctic and Antarctic, I believe. And then a third one is looking at fern evolution. That's who we're trying to line up. So
oh yeah,
bubble formation and fern evolution. So
interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be really good. And there should be, since we're spanning sort of contemporary ice core analysis, and then bubble formation and fern evolution. It should be a really good discussion as well. That's what we're hopeful of.
Yeah, and
Get
I
everybody
learned a
together.
good lesson today. We shouldn't try and do 4 speakers. My apologies to the speakers and not allowing time for questions. Yeah,
Well,
so
let's open it up and see if anyone who's still on the line has a
sure.
question, since we have a few people sticking around. If you do have a question, feel free to come off mute. It's a small group now, so.
There were a lot of questions about the modeling, so maybe we'll in a future meeting we'll think about doing some. There is a whole, well, it's a complicated topic for sure, and Serena, I was excited to see the folks working on. Well, first to see the new publications on the health effects, and then to see the folks trying to see what it is, what's unique about wildfires compared to other sources of PM 2.5. So it's great to see EPA investing in that kind of work.
It's very hard to do, but yeah, very important.
So Serena didn't tell you, but she is a program manager at EPA. So she's we're excited to have her involved with our Arctic community.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to this talk and this group. Sounds like there's a lot of good stuff going on. Haven't been able to check the whole white pages, but there's a lot of stuff.
We
already.
understand. All right, well, I want to thank everyone for hanging around for the extra 5 minutes and wish you a good week. And if you have any ideas for future meetings, don't hesitate to email Jen, Heiss, and myself. And we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thank you.